What I want to tell you is that for me, what motivates this work isn't really the fear of what's going to happen if we don't get climate under control. It's much more, or at least as much, the hope and the sense of what the world on the other side of cheap fossil fuel looks like. Okay? That's where my real intellectual work and where my real emotional attachment is. I think that if we get that kind of international agreement that puts a price on carbon and ends the era of cheap fossil fuel, it'll go some way towards helping deal with this climate catastrophe. But it'll also allow us to glimpse more fully what the next world might look like. It'll help us understand just how much the world we've built around us is a reflection of that cheap fossil fuel. What do I mean? Cheap fossil fuel has done three things. It's made us rich, it's wrecking the climate, and it's allowed us to become the first people in the history of our species who have no need of our neighbors for anything. Okay? Allowed us to become hyper-individualists in a way that no human beings have ever been before. Think about what the American economic mission has been since the end of World War II. We have spent our prosperity basically building bigger houses farther apart from each other. That's how we've defined the American dream, okay? It's come at a big ecological cost. You gotta heat and cool these things and drive between them. Right. But it's come also at a huge social and psychological cost. We called it the American dream and we celebrated our super independence and whatever. But one of the big planning firms in this country has asked Americans every year since the end of World War II, are you happy with your life? And the number of Americans who say, I'm very happy with my life, peaks in the year 1956 and goes steadily but slowly downhill ever since, even though we've trebled our standard of living. How could that be if what we think about the economy and our happiness is correct? It could be, it is, if you look at the data, because in the course of that prospering, past any reasonable point, we've eroded community mightily. Americans feel a great loss of connection to each other, and it's not just some sentimental thing that they feel. It's real. When you live all that way apart from each other, you see each other much less in the course of a day, okay? The average American eats meals with friends or family or neighbors half as often as they did 50 years ago. The average American has half as many close friends as they did 50 years ago. There are not enough iPods on Earth to make up for that kind of loss, okay? Think about what it means. The person who 50 years ago would have been sitting in a similar seat in a similar night would have, on average, had twice as many friends as you do. Twice as many people they could count on that they were close to, intimate with, part of their lives. That's an almost unbelievable loss for a social animal, a primate, to suffer in that kind of time. Which is why it is such a good sign to see that next world beginning to emerge. The fastest growing part of the food economy in this country is local farmers markets. It has been for the last 10 years. The number has doubled and then doubled again. Sales have grown. That's good news ecologically. It makes a lot more sense to send a tomato 5 miles than it does 2,000 miles, which is the distance a normal bite of food in this country now travels before it reaches your lips. I mean, that kind of journey ensures that it is marinated in crude oil before it gets there. But it's even better news socially. A couple of years ago, a pair of sociologists followed shoppers, first around the supermarket, then around the farmer's market. You've all been to the supermarket. You know how it works. You walk in, you fall into a light fluorescent trance, you visit the stations of the cross around the supermarket, you come out with the same basket of stuff you had the week before. That's about it. When they followed people around the farmer's market, they were having on average 10 times more conversations per visit, an order of magnitude more. It was a different social experience. They were rebuilding those connections. And of course they like it. I mean, we think of the farmer's market as some kind of quaint and chic thing that we have thought up, but the farmer's market is how everybody on Earth shopped for food until 50 years ago, and how 80% of the planet still does. I mean, of course we like it. I said something earlier today that I want to repeat. You guys are particularly well placed, because you're here at college, to understand the appeal of this phenomenon. When the old grads come back to campus and say, these were the best years of my life, okay? What they don't mean, oof, you know, couldn't I take mechanical engineering one more time? They mean, those were the 4 weird years in American life when I lived the way that most people around the world have always lived, in close proximity, physically and emotionally, to a lot of other people. And yes, sometimes it's a pain, okay? There's always somebody there, you know, in your business. But most of the time, it's a great pleasure. And the tragedy of the American college is that it spends 4 years training you to make so much money that you never have to live that way again, okay? And you don't have to do that. You can think of more creative things to do if you want. Building the kind of world that we need to build, a kind much more localized, much more in human contact, much sweeter than the one we live on now. That's the work I really want to do. That's the work that means the most to me when I do it home in my place. But it's not the work I spend most of my time doing. Because right now, our house is on fire, and we've got to put that fire out before we concentrate too much on building the nice small house that's going to replace it, okay? That fire is raging, and it's going to take everything out with it, including the possibility for the kind of decent future that we could build. And that's why I do what I do. That's why I hope very much you'll work with us at 350.org and try to do what you can. Thank you so much.